Guys, am I weird for being addicted to ChatGPT? Is this transhumanist
Oh,
01?
you're not weird at all, transhumanist 01. I think everyone's addicted to ChatGPT.
Welcome to Answering the Internet by Battery Ventures, where we answer the Internet's most pressing questions on AI. I'm Jason Mendel, Vice President of Battery Ventures, and I'm joined by Vikram Chatterji, CEO of our portfolio company Galileo, a generative AI evaluation platform. Awesome. All right, you ready?
Yeah, let's do this.
First question.
Are people in tech inside an AI echo chamber? I can hear you. I can hear the echo.
Yeah. I think likely yes. We definitely live in a bit of a bubble, being venture capitalists, living in Silicon Valley. That said, I think the opportunity for AI is huge, and there's some really interesting use cases. You guys are obviously seeing a lot of it. What are you guys seeing across customers that gets you excited? Any interesting use cases that really have jumped out?
A bunch of them. I do think in terms of it being an echo chamber, like the folks talk a lot about chatbots all the time. We think it's gone way beyond that. If you actually look outside of the AI tech echo chamber, there's all sorts of use cases with generative AI right now, especially with agents right now. It's gone in this realm where you can, if you think of an action that you want to perform, you can just do it, and you can make it much faster because of generative AI. The opportunities are absolutely incredible now. So I don't think it's become an echo chamber anymore. It's actually changing, and everyone's talking about it. So it's really exciting.
How is an AI hallucination different from a human error?
It's actually not very different, I think, because at least these neural network-based AI, it is powered by these transformer-based architectures, which are essentially wired similar to the brain. They have these weights that are constantly adjusted. And they're trained very similar to how the human brain has been trained over time. Like you see things, you learn things, and you adapt to it. Sometimes you see things, you learn things, and then someone asks you a new question, and then you're just not ready for that, so you make an error. I think of the hallucinations is similar. They're trying their best based on what they know, but sometimes they just don't know enough. And so they make these hallucinations, as they're called.
I think the human side is much more based on cognitive behavior. So a human tends to make things up based on past experiences versus AI is trying to generate the next logical piece in the sentence or the next logical thing. And so I think of an AI error much more so in the realm of the model hasn't necessarily been exposed to the right training data or the right scenario, versus humans can hallucinate based on trying to fill in a missing gap based on a prior experience or some sort of emotional reaction.
I feel like a human has a lot more from a cognitive overload perspective that they have to think about. And an AI, on the other hand, can get away with a lot because it's just expected to just literally try to get the right answer as quickly as possible. So I feel like a human error is just has many more dimensions to it than an AI's hallucination does. What's the most important skill to develop in the age of artificial intelligence? Ooh.
I guess the question is it technical, non-technical? Where do you start?
Technical skills. The skill to be developed is more with people who are used to technology being the way it used to be.
Yeah, it's almost how to interact with complex AI systems. But it's also foundation models for the first time have democratized AI, right? Historically, you needed a large data science team to build and train their own models. Now they're available off the shelf. And so almost the soft skills or user experience design things to take something that is very technical and expose it to a human or an individual becomes really important. So
on the technical side, to your point, I think what's interesting is a lot of the developers today have to start learning data science concepts, which is different than how they used to behave and used to act when they were building out these kinds of AI apps. So they're not used to experimenting. They're not used to thinking about those kinds of concepts. So I think the big skill is going to be for developers to start becoming more like data scientists, and vice versa. So there is this emergence of the AI engineer that's happening. So if you're building in the world of AI, it's brand new. Most of the stuff has not been taught in schools yet. So it's a brand new skill to be developed all by itself.
Yeah. What about on the business user side?
I think it's similar on the business user side, across sales, across marketing, across engineering management, where folks are all grappling with this idea of how do we take what we already knew with how the world used to be versus how can I inject AI tools for greater productivity.
Yeah, absolutely. Will you welcome our robot overlords? I think the way to interpret this question is, will AI rule the world? I think there's a lot of fear that's rooted in AI and a lot of questions as to whether AI will take over humanity or AI will sort of replace humans in a lot of the jobs. What do you think about that? Is AI conscious? Is there sort of a human aspect to AI, or is it more so a machine that humans need to prompt and interact with and push in the right directions?
It's definitely the latter right now, but also ever since AI has been a thing since the 1960s, there have been books about this, right? About how the Terminator is here. The Terminator, the movie, was in some ways inspired because of all of this, Skynet and all of that. The way I think of this in a more practical way, to maybe make this a bit more real, is the dumber way of thinking of this is like AI on the edge is coming. And so what I'm actually excited about with robot overlords is my dishwasher having AI and my refrigerator having AI. Those are the kinds of robot overlords I would absolutely welcome in my life.
I think the other thing is, I don't think AI has emotions the way that a human does. It's not aware of its surroundings, and it still requires a human input to, or some sort of input to take the action that it needs. Versus being truly autonomous. And I think there's natural uncertainty and sort of fear with new technology, right? We saw it with the first generation of cloud infrastructure, hesitation to move your data or your application into someone else's cloud. I think that's fairly normalized now, and we'll probably see more comfort around AI as the technology matures.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, let's see what this one. What makes it so difficult to prevent an AI hallucination? I feel like this is your question.
This is my question. Well, use Galileo. So what makes it so difficult to prevent one? The thing is, like, hallucinations, until recently when AI started being used much more in regular applications, hallucinations were not considered to be a bad thing.
Why is a hallucination different with a generative model versus a predictive model? And what is a hallucination?
Well, the hallucination with any kind of a neural network model would just mean that it's trained on X amount of data, and when you've asked it a question, it gives you the answer in a way which is unpredictable, which in your and my world would be just wrong. But from the model's perspective, it thinks that it's right because all it knows is what it's been trained with. And so for an engineer or someone who's actually working with these models, they probably need to fix that by giving it more context about what's going on in the world. It's just like what happens with human beings. If you answer a question which is wrong, there's probably some asymmetrical information, so you're supposed to fill in the gaps there. That's what a hallucination is all about. But it is difficult to prevent one because at the end of the day, it just depends on how complex your questions are. If you ask me 2 + 2, I'll tell you it's 4, but you start to ask me more questions around differential mathematics, I might just not be able to answer that question immediately. But when you ask an AI a question, for the most part, it's trying to be eager and answer the question. So a lot of this is to tell the AI model when to kind of let the human know that, hey, this is out of my depth. I probably can't answer this question anymore.
And even with a language model, I think detecting a hallucination or an error in the model is hard because even when the model is not doing what it's supposed to be doing, it is doing what it's supposed to be doing, which is generating text or natural language.
Yeah, exactly. We used to always talk about for a long time the term for this has been when the model is overconfidently wrong. And that happens all the time because it's like this prodigious child that is always trying to answer the question, but sometimes just gets it wrong. But it doesn't seem that way because it's just overconfidently wrong. Versus a human being gives the wrong answer, you can probably put a lie detector on it and on the human being and figure out that this is not going in the right direction.
Models don't sweat.
Models don't sweat. I see a lot of AI related startups. What exactly is AI?
I feel like AI has become a bit of a buzzword. Ultimately, it feels like a combination of computational power and data, right? That sort of replicates aspects of human intelligence, not all of human intelligence, but certain aspects of it.
I mean, for the longest time, AI used to be talked about as it's machine learning in a suit, because the data science community would talk about it as data science, and then it became machine learning, which was considered a businessy term, which then was considered talked about as AI by people who would not know about it. But I think ever since ChatGPT came on the board, it's just the new brand name that's been given to it. And generative AI, which is also not a net new thing in of itself, has taken the world by storm because it's generative, and I think because it can generate images and speech and text which didn't exist before. It's almost like a magic trick for human beings, and people like that. So it's just grown in popularity. The moment was a long time coming, like for what, like 40 to 50 years at this point. People have been waiting for this. There've been booms and busts for AI, and now finally, I feel like especially with these agentic systems, and you can make any kind of an API call, make any kind of an action just happen automatically for you. I feel like there's a lot more startups that are going to be coming by you guys.
Yeah, all the core infrastructure building blocks are in place, so now the application layer can flourish.
Yeah, that's right. And also, like, the cost of consumption and the cost of intelligence with these models is also going dramatically down, and open source is becoming a bigger and bigger thing. So that's probably why Technical 7643 is seeing a lot of AI related startups coming about.
Yeah. All right. What makes AI generated answers, excluding those that have been heavily prompt engineered, so obvious to spot? I feel like the models are getting better. They're getting harder to spot. But
yeah,
a lot of times I feel like the AI generated answers feel very formulaic. I think each human has their own way of speaking, reading, writing, and AI just feels like a formula, very rigid. Also, sometimes it feels overly verbose, like it's sort of including facts to include facts, almost to a fault.
Yeah.
But it is getting harder to detect. I mean, this is a problem that you guys deal with.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think it's interesting because oftentimes, if they've not been heavily prompt engineered, it just means that the guardrails are not in place for it to be able to answer the question in exactly the shape and form that the human expects it to be, right? If it's an AI application for, customer support for a healthcare institution, and it's trying to be super funny, that just wouldn't work necessarily because there's somebody who needs an urgent response. So I feel like those are the kinds of situations where the situational awareness doesn't exist because it wasn't heavily prompt engineered.
Yeah, you have to provide the context. It doesn't understand its environment.
Yeah, if you provide the context, you provide the instructions, you have to like heavily prompt engineer it, otherwise it just won't work.
Has AI been reduced to a buzzword now? Monkeys love beer.
AI been reduced to a buzzword? Yes and no. I feel like in the tech ecosystem, it's not so much a buzzword as much as there's a lot of optimism about it. Sure, it's a buzzy optimism, I would say. Yes, I think everyone is getting a little overwhelmed by like the term AI. I also think it's being misused in a lot of places. But outside of the tech ecosystem, the world is a large place. And so if you actually travel to parts of the world which are not necessarily technology hubs, I feel like over there, it's not as much of a buzzword yet.
I mean, I agree with everything you said. I think the opportunity size for AI has never been bigger. Something that we always talk about, and I think the tech and VC industry sort of talks about a lot, is how AI has unlocked new opportunities to displace services revenue, human labor versus purely sell software to replace software.
Do you think it's used often in places where it shouldn't be used, or people don't know what they're talking about? That's where I feel like it becomes more of a buzzword.
I don't think so. I think the use cases so far have been fairly mainstream, and people are starting to see a lot of value from it. I think it's definitely heavily indexed to software and just technology in general, but I would expect that we see it in some of the more adjacent industries like manufacturing, healthcare, life sciences, things like that. Anywhere where there's a lot of data and sort of repetitive tasks makes a lot of sense to see value from AI.
Do you think it's a fad though? Do you think it's here for a little while and then everyone's going to stop talking about it?
I think it's here to stay.
Okay. All right. I think so too.
From Deleted. If Bard is hallucinating, doesn't that mean the AI is experiencing consciousness and attempting to understand the request on a different level than as opposed to just executing the order? I think what it's trying to ask is AI a conscious, does AI have sort of consciousness.
Yeah, versus it just trying to, just trying to obey
Yeah.
an order that's being asked of it.
I think today AI doesn't have a human level of consciousness, meaning that it doesn't have emotions or a true understanding of its environment,
Yeah.
and requires human input in order to produce an output. I don't think a hallucination is necessarily a sign that the model is trying to be conscious or have conscious thoughts.
Yeah, yeah. I can see why it can seem that way to somebody because, again, it's trying to make sense of the world and trying to say something which it wasn't trained with in the first place. So it is generating net new information, which typically I feel like is the easiest and simplest sign of consciousness, so to speak. Because a human being that is conscious, and you ask that human being a question, the fun part of that is that the answer is going to be unpredictable. You never know. It might be a joke. It might be an actual information that you never knew before, but you certainly didn't provide that person with that information. So I can see why. But at the same time, to your point, I don't think the fact that it's hallucinating is necessarily a sign that it's conscious. It just means that that algorithm, that mathematical formula behind the scenes, that's being used to make sure that it can actually generate the response is just working. So it's a bit conflated to talk about consciousness.
Yeah.
But I don't know about you. I've heard a lot about AGI and consciousness ever since generative AI started becoming more of a thing. Although those are, I feel like, fairly separate topics.
Yeah, I agree. Do you think AGI is possible?
It depends how you define AGI, because a lot of people just talk about AGI as an AI chatbot, let's say, answering a question in a very similar way to a human being. If that's the case, then yes, of course, it was actually possible a year ago. But for super complex use cases, not really. Like if you ask it questions about complex topics in physics and ask it to come up with something net new, it's probably not going to happen very soon. But it's on the cusp.
Yeah, the idea of being able to form its own unique hypothesis and validate it.
Yeah, it's happening slowly, right? We're moving in that direction with these reasoning engines and with them actually starting to think a lot more.
What advices could you give to people who want to go into machine learning? For students, what is a good path to get there? And for people with previous careers, what could be an interesting resume and past experiences to transition from?
Yeah. Well, honestly, I feel like a lot of people are upskilling right now when it comes to generative AI. It's even the people who've studied machine learning recently are having to not necessarily reteach themselves from scratch, but they are having to grapple with newer and newer concepts that are coming up all the time. I feel like, honestly, the biggest thing to do over here is to have a lot of curiosity and just build stuff yourself.
Do you think you need a technical background to be successful?
I don't necessarily think so, actually. There are lots of tools now for dramatically reducing the barrier there as well. There like, as an example, you could use a lot of tools for coding and for code generation where you don't have to be technical. I've heard of a lot of non-technical folks in marketing building out their own marketing bots just by using different kinds of code generation tools by themselves. Now, obviously, if it's a complex system that you might need some more code, that's always going to be there. But for the most part, to get started, not so much. So you got to just keep trying these different kinds of tools out there.
Any closing thoughts?
There are lots of questions out there, lots of curiosity. It seems like a lot of questions about hallucinations, which is actually what Galileo was built for.
Yeah.
We've always been working on language models for like over a decade, but that trust with AI is, I think, the number one bottleneck today, right? For people to overcome so that they can truly harness the power of this technology. So super excited for everything that's coming up in the world of AI, and this is truly just the beginning. It's going to be 2025, I think, is going to be an even crazier and much more interesting year.
Yeah, we're in for an exciting time.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on AI Answering the Internet. For more fun content, please subscribe to Condensing the Cloud, which is in the description below.